Hello everyone, it's Vince signing again, and I'm going to be talking about the Five Nights at Freddy's book that I just finished reading. It took me a while to get through it, mostly because I kind of was picking it up and putting it back down on and off again. Not because of anything in the book in particular, but because I just didn't have enough time to really read it in just one straight shoot like I normally will with a lot of the books I read. And if people are curious about it and want to read it, the links will be in the description below, so you can find information about it and where to purchase it. But what do I think about this story is the real question of the day. And the even bigger question is, can this story appeal to non-Five Nights at Freddy's fans? And to both of those questions, I give a fairly enthusiastic yes. I stepped into this fully expecting kind of just borderline schlock and constant, nudge nudge winks to, essentially just Easter egg after Easter egg and reference after reference to the original games in this book, and I was pleasantly surprised. This book is an entity all to itself, and the fact that this story takes place in a completely separate canon and has completely separate characters, and even the animatronics that people have kind of grown to know over the course of the franchise. Franchise is a weird thing to say that about an indie game, but over the course of the franchise, they don't really have presence in the book until 2/3 into it. And I think I see that as a good thing, because for the most part we follow these characters, Charlie, who is the main character, and the daughter of the man Henry, who originated the Freddy Fazbear, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, and he was the one who created the animatronics. We follow her, her friends Carlton, John, Lamar, Marla, and her little brother Jason. And if I had to say one real complaint about this story that occasionally took me out of it, it was the dialogue was occasionally clunky and tend to be a little bit on the exposition side. And I will say that when it came to the exposition, it came at times when it made sense to have certain things explained from one character to another. It's not like two characters who knew this already just need to have, well, let's just talk about this out loud so that the reader would be completely up to speed. But like I said, it mostly comes from how a little bit clunky the dialogue can get at times. And maybe it's just noticeable for me because I'm kind of a stickler when it comes to that kind of stuff. I'm not saying I'm that good at writing dialogue, but that's one of my personal favorite things to write in a story, and I kind of nitpick anytime I feel like it's not being as done as it could be. But again, that's just me. That's just a minor nitpick. It just could be my own personal subjective taste. So, other than that, and aside from the I feel that the ending sort of peters out just a bit. I feel like it's a satisfying climax, but after the climax, the rising action climax, falling action. The falling action to me seemed a bit too brief. It seemed like they just wanted to end the story at that point because they were kind of tired out. This was a very solid read, and I would actually recommend this to not only Five Nights at Freddy's fans, but fans of just horror fiction in general. Now, I understand that people who roll their eyes at the franchise and roll their eyes at these series and the games and all the fan art and whatnot, they probably won't be able to get into this as easily because in their eyes, and it's sort of what I would call and it's not really fair to say the Freddy Krueger effect, where it doesn't matter how well the first installment was and how well it established this person as a legitimate threat, the following sequels just took away whatever fear factor that they originally had. It's the added effect of really becoming too popular for your own good. You've like we see it all the time when it comes to anything. Slenderman, Ben, and we're going based on also slasher villains, but the same thing with the animatronics. It's kind of hard to take this first game so seriously, like, oh, Chica's so scary, when there isn't a mountain of porn drawn about her. But again, the way that this game kind of presents those animatronics, again, they don't show up until 2/3 into the book, like near the very final act. They aren't characters. I have to stress that very much. They aren't characters. They are just threats to the protagonists. They are huge threats to the protagonists, because the way that this game kind of writes them around, they're more akin to fucking Terminators in terms of how much damage they could potentially do. When the story eventually starts out, we actually, it's a, when the story starts out and it's kind of giving you an out of context clip, or out of context scenario that starts later in the book. It's Charlie essentially hiding from Foxy, and Foxy, she's hiding behind these arcade cabinets trying to get away, like, not get caught, and he's ripping them out and just tossing them aside casually looking for her, and it's describing it in great detail. So yeah, they do not give, these things are something you don't want to fuck with. Like, if I had to say what was the most tense moment regarding them, I would say it was a part where Charlie is in the bathroom hiding from Bonnie, who she had discovered it just got off the stage, and she's hiding in a bathroom stall trying not to get caught, and it just had me kind of not on the edge of my seat. That's kind of exaggerating, but I legitimately was I was very much into it. Like, the door just toss open, and the way it describes him just clunking in there and looking underneath the stalls, and she's just desperately trying to crawl under one just to get him to make sure that he doesn't see her. Like, yeah, these things aren't something to be fucked with. So, yeah, the animatronics are handled very well. They're used sparingly, which I really do appreciate. It actually gives them a little bit more weight when they actually do start doing things. But for the most part, we follow these characters. Charlie, like I said, Charlie, Lamar, John, Marla, Carlton, and Jason. Charlie is a very... She seems like she's a loner type, and she has a lot of reason to be a loner. Yeah, as you read in the story, you'll come to find out she's had a lot of trauma piled on her in her life from an event that essentially took place due to an incident involving an animatronic. She wasn't hurt, but their friend Michael in their childhood was kidnapped, and that and many other things kind of led her to being sort of a kind of somewhat shy introvert. I'm not saying she's always standoffish. She's friendly enough. She's just not very keen on always being in the company of others. But she's a likable character for the most part. She's competent. She's generally nice person. And if I had to say, what's wrong with my speech? If I had to say one thing I really like in terms of character interaction, is the relationship between her and John, because it's a kind of, John's kind of the romantic interest. He does have a personality of its own. He's the quick-witted, kind of calm, collected type who manages to kind of think things through. Like, he's the one that in a tense situation is usually the one that's trying to figure out a situation in a level-headed manner, and that makes him, especially what happens later on in the book, that makes him very much likable. but it's very clear that he's a love interest for Charlie, but it's never overt and it doesn't feel forced. They do kind of have a thing for each other, but it comes off more as just him being supportive to her and her reciprocating that. She's basically just being grateful that he's so supportive, and it doesn't feel like he's doing it just to get on her good side. It genuinely feels like he's just being a really good friend. Like, she breaks with all the shit that happens later on in the book, and all the trauma that kind of gets piled on her after all the shit that she kind of finds out. He's always there. He's always offering to comfort her and make her feel better. He's always trying to offer solutions to kind of help give her closure on a lot of things. Like I say, he's a likable character. Then there's Carlton, who's kind of like a know-it-all, smart aleck kind of prankster. I like him. He's a funny character, funny enough. And that's all you can really say about him, other than like I just basically described him right there. He's well written enough. I mean, one of the things I do like about Scott Cawthon's writing, I think he's surprisingly good at comedy. I mean, he does make a living out of trolling his fan base, basically, so it makes sense. There's I forgot to mention Jessica, who is kind of a little bit of a control freak. Not control freak. She's just a kind of hoity, I would say maybe gossipy kind of character. She doesn't really stand out. She didn't really stand out much to me outside of being rather authoritative and how she spoke to some people. But then again, I could also describe the other character, Marla. But the character Marla is best defined by her extreme overprotective nature towards her younger brother Jason. And Jason is he's basically a kid character. He's not annoying. He interacts well enough with the other characters, but other than being a kid, that's all he really has going for him. And then there's Lamar, who honestly was the most forgettable character to me. And again, these characters, for the most part, in terms of how they interact with each other, how they work together to try to get out of a situation, it makes them very likable. I didn't want any of them to get hurt. I actually really did enjoy reading about them, but for the most part, like I said, Lamar's the one character. If he had been taken out of the story and replaced by someone else, I probably wouldn't have noticed. And that's a mean thing to say, but that's honestly how I felt. Okay, but we essentially follow those characters, and okay, they go to Hurricane, which is a small town somewhere in Utah, to commemorate the life of a friend of theirs who was kidnapped several years ago when they were all children, and he had got kidnapped while they were at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, because since Charlie's father owned the place and ran it, he essentially could do whatever he wanted. And he basically could have them always. They were basically. Why do I keep saying that? They were there practically all the time because, again, he runs the place. And one day the animatronics went haywire and started spazzing out and freaking out, and everyone was running away. But their friend Michael was, and John was the one that pointed out. He remembered seeing it, but he never thought that anyone would believe him. He ended up getting snatched up by a yellow animatronic, and you can see where that was going. So I'm not going to spoil what happens then, because there actually will be revealing a few plot twists. But he gets snatched up, and they go to a commemoration of his life, which was being held by their old school, and is, when they make an award or some kind of scholarship for someone who's passed away, the parents were just holding out hope that maybe he would turn up again over the years, but they kind of realize that it's most likely that he's dead. So after that whole thing blows over, they go to I can't remember if it was before or after they do that. They go to visit Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, which has been boarded up, to say the least, barricaded by what was supposed to be a mall that they were building, but they just said fuck it and just left it there to rot. Like, they tried building a mall. They didn't want to demolish Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, so they built over it, is what I'm trying to say. Like a mini mall. And they break into it, they look around, some shit goes down, and that's as much as I'll say. And again, this I had to really dig into the question of whether or not non-Five Nights at Freddy's fans are going to enjoy this. And again, I really do think that this is because again, I'm not the biggest Five Nights at Freddy's fan. I do like the series, but this isn't a really solid piece of work. This, and I hate this term because it's very stupid and pandering, but I think it works here. This story, this Five Nights at Freddy's story works well. It's this Five Nights at Freddy's story to people who don't like Five Nights at Freddy's. If you can't get into it because of the overly long mythos behind it, and well, mythos, the story behind it, all the games, or you just don't like the animatronics and how goofy they look, this story has because when you hear something described, I think it does a little bit more than when you just visually see another person's interpretation of it. So I think there's some benefit in that. And also, again, the animatronics as they're described are just fucking ruthless killing machines, essentially. I was about to spoil something else. And again, the links will be in the description below if you want to get it yourself. I highly recommend this. It was a good read. And if you've read this or you plan on reading this, please let me know what you think or what you kind of expect from it. I was pleasantly surprised. It was a solid piece of work. And if Scott ever decides to write another one or just write another book in general, I'll be more than curious to pick it up. The guy has he's got a really good eye for this. He's got a really good something for this. I don't know what I'm trying to say. The book is good. Pick it up. Tell me what you thought about it. Or if you already read it, I'd like to hear it. So that's it. Bye.